Greetings, viewers. Eric the Car Guy here, back again with another live show where I answer your questions posted to my Google Plus event. Sometimes butcher your names. I apologize for that in advance. A few things before we get started. Firstly, I will be taking the questions, as I mentioned, from the Google Plus event on my Google Plus page. There are links on my social network. If you wish to ask a question, you can post it there, and I will do my best to get to it during the course of the show. Also, if you are watching this on YouTube, I cannot see the comments being posted there. Therefore, I will not be answering those questions that get posted to the YouTube video. Apologies for that. However, there is always EricTheCarGuy.com that you can go to get help with your automotive issues all the time, pretty much, unless the server is being serviced or something like that. Other than that, EricTheCarGuy.com is there for you. FAQ page. Answers about 80% of the questions I get asked. So I strongly suggest you check that out. And if you can't get an answer there, you can head over to the forum. Also, there's a search function where you can search the entire site, videos, forum links, everything. All kinds of things to make your life easier in finding answers to your automotive issues. But we have this live show, which I'm participating in now. And why don't we just get started and jump in with your questions. Starting with Andrew Henrik. This is, hey Eric, it's Andrew with a 95 Mazda B3000 V6 speedometer that does not work from the show before last. The speedometer is purely electronic setup, no cable. Any thoughts? I think I might have said in the previous show that you mentioned here that plugging in the scan tool and seeing if you have a speed reading on the scan tool. If you don't have it on the scan tool, well, if you have it on the scan tool and you don't have it on the dash, it could mean that there's a problem with the communication between the two, or if you don't see a speed signal on the scan tool, then it could be the speed sensor is bad. Honestly, you're going to have to see if you have any check engine lights that might help lead you toward the problem, might indicate a speed sensor problem or something like that. Different companies use different methods in order to get a speedometer reading. Some take it from the computer, some take it directly from the speed sensor. It's really specific to your vehicle. So you're going to have to go through the troubleshooting on that in order to find out specifically what is wrong. I honestly couldn't tell you off the cuff here. Santiago Morales, hey Eric, most of the mechanics and parts guys say that a car with 200,000 kilometers or more, 120,000 miles, should use a thicker oil. For example, if I use 10W30, then switch to 20W50 due to the age and mileage. They also says the thinner oil like 0W20 is for very cold weather. In other words, is useless in Panama that is 38 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees Fahrenheit. What do you think? Are you still using the cheap engine oil? Greetings from Panama City. I could not disagree with them more. I do not advocate using thicker oil ever. And the main reason is because the thicker the oil you use, the longer it's going to take to get to the top of the engine during startup, which if metal-to-metal contact happens with the metal parts inside your engine, then it starts to wear much quicker. Engineers spend a great deal of time trying to figure out what viscosity of oil is best for the engine that they created. A lot of testing, a lot of blown up engines, a lot of stuff that they do to try to figure that number out. And just as off the cuff, that number, the first number with the W behind it, is the zero, or the winter rating. And that is what it flows like at a given temperature when it's cold outside. The other rating, the 50 or 30 or whatever, is the flow rate when it gets to operating temperature. So that's what those two numbers stand for. So in other words, if the engine calls for 10W30, even if you're in a very hot climate, run 10W30. Unless there's something going on that you've experienced otherwise where that's necessary. Sometimes in the owner's manual, they list for particularly hot or particularly cold climates, perhaps a different oil viscosity recommendation. But it just depends on your location. However, for the most part, as I said, if it says it on the oil cap or it says it in the owner's manual, stick by that. Don't re-engineer it on your own. You could be asking for trouble. So I get this type of question all the time. In fact, I did a video where I sat down with engineers that engineer engine oil. And I will post a link to that in the description. And this is one of the things that came up during that discussion. I go by what the people that pretty much make the stuff say. So it's not just my opinion. I'm following the recommendations of people that actually make oil. All right. Let's see. All right. Repito Rivera. Hey, Eric the Car Guy, I would like to ask if it is safe for a diesel engine to have the turbocharger's VNT lever to be pulled all the time, eliminating the use of the actuator, causing the turbocharger to produce more air. Will it safely give it a boost? It is a Pario 1990 4D56T diesel engine with the EGR valve removed to lessen black smoke, but it loses some power. And I noticed that the engine oil is leaking between the cylinder head and block on one side about 1 inch. I know it has a cracked head gasket because my radiator produces air. Does this say I have a warped cylinder head? It sounds like you've got some issues with the engine, and honestly, I wouldn't try to add more boost to it on an ailing engine as it is. I don't think that's advisable. EGR actually helps eliminate pre-ignition, things like that. So it can be actually helpful, especially under high pressure situations. It's an inert gas that's supposed to help cool the combustion chamber and make it so that the engine doesn't annihilate itself. So you've got some issues with this engine, and if the question is, should you make it so you're getting more boost all the time? No, I don't think that's a good idea. I think you should address the issues with the engine and see where you go from there. And as far as rebuilding or replacing, diesels may be a little bit different, but I'm always an advocate of replacement, with either a used or even better, a remanufactured unit that's going to give you the most life out of it. Rebuilding often involves tools and skills that you may not necessarily have, and one tiny mistake at a thousandth of an inch or a millimeter can cost you an engine. So weigh those options carefully and consider your abilities and tools and take things from there. And always consult with people that know more than you. I don't know specifically about your engine, but there's probably somebody out there that knows specifically about your engine and the problems that it has and how to address those problems. Those are the people you want to try to seek out, because we're mechanics, yes, but a lot of times we tend to specialize in certain things. And as I said, some people are better with certain brands of products or diesels or gasoline or whatever. So try to seek out the people with knowledge. And these days with the internet, you got forums, things like that you can consult. So there are a lot of resources at your disposal to find answers to the questions that you have. Ryan Mason has a 2001 F-150 5.4 liter with 189,000 miles. He uses 15W40. I remember reading this before. This is just a statement. It's not really a question, so I'm not going to address that one. Jason Whipple has a 2008 Dodge Avenger 2.4 with a check engine light. Ran the code coming out with a P2004 intake runner stuck open. Could you share some light? As I've done a bunch of research on this line, and I'm just confused as what to do before I go throwing parts or money at it, or even worse, bringing it to the dealer. By the way, the date of manufacture is 9/07. Thanks always for what you do again, and hope you and your family and cameraman Brian have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you for that, and I hope you do as well. I did some research on this before the show, and the most popular thing that came up was the replacement of the intake manifold itself and then reflashing the PCM. I'm sorry to say, but that was the most popular thing that came up. I can't say specifically what is going to work for your application, but the majority of the solutions to that problem were just that. There's a technical service bulletin on it. So if the technical service bulletin hasn't been done on your vehicle up to this point, I would say that's probably what you're looking at. To find out if that technical service bulletin has been performed, you can call up the dealer with your VIN number, give them that VIN number, and they will be able to look it up on their database and find out whether or not it's been done in the past. If it hasn't been done in the past, it's probably what you're looking at. Let's see. Ryan Mason, if there's a question, it would be, my girlfriend drives a 1987 Mercedes 190 2.5 turbo diesel. She keeps cracking the oil pan 3 times in the years. I have used putty steel in the past to fix it and wonder if there's a better way. The replacement pan is over $300 and the engine almost has to be removed to change it. And yes, it is getting sold. I love the car over 1 million miles, but the roads here are better suited for a Jeep. Reading this, what comes to mind is if you're in a place to where, obviously this is a car and you're driving on, well, I don't want to say off-road, but dirt roads with issues like this. First thing that came to my mind was skid plate. In other words, you put some sort of plate underneath the engine and the oil pan. That way there's a line of defense before you get to the oil pan. Now, of course, it's going to have to be removable because you have to be able to get in there and change the oil. But loving the car and wanting to still drive it, I'd say see if you can get her to slow down a little bit and use a skid plate and see if that can help prevent it. So if you repair it again, see if you can come up with something you can fabricate to put under there to protect it in the future. Let's see. And some of these questions, like there's one here with an entire paragraph that I'm not going to read through the whole paragraph. I want to try to move through the questions. However, if there's time at the end, I'll come back to it. But Jeffrey Stath has a 85 Bronco 351 Windsor with a C6 that he's going to swap for a rebuilt C6. I got rust all underneath and I need a temporary solution to stop it till summer. P.S. Do I need the kickdown lever hooked up? It's a strong engine. Okay, I'm going to say pretty much what I always do with these questions is rust never sleeps. There's nothing you can do to stop it. In fact, once it starts, that's it. It's over. It's just going to continue on until the end. Rust will win in the end. That's just how it is. Just like the Neil Young song, Rust Never Sleeps. As far as the kickdown lever, well, if you want to be able to kick down the transmission when you go and pass somebody, I would say that hooking up the kickdown lever is a good thing. I can't see why you wouldn't want to hook it up, strong engine or not. Because basically what that does is it kicks the transmission down into second gear to raise the RPMs and get you into a different part of the power curve for the engine. And without doing that, well, it's going to take you a lot longer to pass people or go up a hill, or they put it there for a reason. All right. Andy Pittman, his dad has a 2004 Ford F-150 5.4 liter Triton. For the last week or so, when he drives, it comes to a stop. The truck stalls on him unless he has his foot on the gas a little. It started happening right after we replaced his battery. He made sure the battery was hooked up good and the cables weren't loose or had corrosion. I did a little research online and it seems like it could be the throttle position sensor. There's no check engine light, however. What are your thoughts on this? Also, the last hangout, I asked you about the rubbing sound on my tip around, and you said it was the plastic wheel well cover to see if it was hanging down or loose, and it turns out that it was. I tightened it back up, and now there's no rubbing sound. Thanks, Andy. I love getting the feedback that I've actually been successful with these questions, because it's not often that I get a chance to find out if any of the advice I've given has been successful, and it's always nice to hear when it has, so thank you for that. As far as your dad's stalling problem, I wouldn't go straight at the throttle position sensor right out of the gate. In fact, if you hook up a scan tool and look at the live data, you would be able to observe what the throttle position sensor is doing. I think it's more likely to be possibly a problem with the idle air control valve. And I'm going thus based on the fact that you have no check engine lights or anything like that present. Sometimes what can happen with those idle air control valves is they can start sticking and do not allow enough air to go past into the engine to keep the engine running when you're off the throttle. Therefore, it sometimes stalls or runs rough and the RPMs get really low. So the first thing I would do is look at that. And oftentimes what I'll do is I'll take the handle of a screwdriver, the plastic part while the engine is running, and I'll tap on the valve. And if there's a change in the RPM when I do that, that's where I start looking. Some people remove them, clean them, and they've had success with it. Me, I've had hit and miss success with it. And as a technician, you want to have 100% success rate. So that in order to ensure that, I often replace the idle air control valve, just throwing it out there. But I'd be looking at that before the TPS. And if you suspect the TPS, take a look and see what it's doing in the live data with a scan tool if you have that capability. Here we are with Drives 314 Halo. Hey, Eric, I'm back with a 2006 Hyundai Tiburon. Tiburon means shark, I think. Yeah, that's what it was, shark. I recently did the spark plugs and wires and found that there was about 1 millimeter of white crap on the old ones. I drove it with the new ones for about 200 miles and they look normal. I'm not sure if I should be concerned about this. Thoughts? Also, the engine has been burning oil, but I think that's because I drive for 50 minutes at 75 miles an hour at 3,200 RPM. It's got 120,000 miles on it. My next issue is a check engine light. When I first bought the car, it was winter, and I got a P0130O2 sensor, bank 1 sensor 1. But it went away on its own. I drove as my daily driver all the way through the summer and didn't get a single check engine light. But now that it's winter, I got the same code again, and it went away once it warmed up. Once again, not sure if I should replace it or leave it. Thanks for your help. You're awesome. Well, thank you for that. Okay, getting to the residue on the plugs. Yes, you are probably burning oil. And yes, if you're driving at a high rate of speed for a sustained period of time, it increases cylinder pressure and the likelihood of burning oil is increased. In fact, just last week, I posted a picture. Was it last week or the week before? I posted a picture on my Instagram that also ended up on Twitter and Facebook about spark plugs that I'd pulled out of an engine that had that same white crusty stuff that you're talking about. And that's often an indication that you're burning oil. So that's probably how it is. And given how you're driving and the age of the vehicle, keep an eye on the oil level, keep it topped off. You'd probably be okay. I don't think it's warranting going in and rebuilding the engine or anything just yet. I mean, it'll probably be just fine for some time. Just keep the oil topped off. As for your other question about the O2 sensor, that's a tough call. Really, you have to check the O2 sensor. Personally, I like to plug in a scan tool, look at the live data, and see what the O2 sensor is doing. It should be switching back and forth between rich and lean rather rapidly once the engine is up to operating temperature. If it does not do this and you see kind of a slow back and forth movement, I would say the O2 sensor is probably getting a little bit lazy, and it's not a bad idea to replace it. And given that if this is the same vehicle, that it's burning oil, it could foul out the O2 sensor in the same way that the spark plugs got fouled. There you go. So you may be looking at the replacement of that O2 sensor in order to confirm it, see what its output is if possible. And as I said, for me, a fast way to do that is with a scan tool. Scan tool has been great, and OBD2 has been great, because before that we used to have to do direct measurements and things like that in order to get those readings. So they really did make it a lot easier in some ways with OBD2 when it came along. And now with OBD3, we'll see what happens. Trip Ripper has a 4-barrel Rochester carburetor. When he turns the truck on in the morning, it revs up really high, higher than normal, almost like I have the pedal to the floor. I tried adjusting my choke, but when I open the choke just a little bit, it idles too low, and if I leave it, it will idle too high. What could be the problem? I tapped the gas pedal and it still won't idle back down. The truck is a 1985 Chevy C10. Another problem at 35 miles per hour is the truck starts wobbling. The rim is not bent and the wheels have not been balanced, or have been balanced. I don't think the axle is bent, but it looks pretty straight. What could be wrong? Okay, first let's start with that carburetor. Yeah, it's hard to say. It's an older carburetor. There are a couple of things. I've actually found where the screws have fallen out of the throttle plates on the secondaries, and they sort of got jammed open a little bit. And as a result, it exhibited the same symptom that you're talking about. Another common problem with that carburetor is the throttle shaft starts to wear out and causes a vacuum leak. I don't know if it would cause a big enough vacuum leak to cause the high idle that you have there, but there's another place to look. Vacuum leaks in general on a carbureted vehicle are something you certainly need to address. I've got videos on rebuilding carburetors, adjusting carburetors, setting them up. Also, you have to make sure that the throttle is going to be fully closed. There may be things on the outside that are holding it open. There's a lot there. There's a lot going on there. You really have to sort of know how to tune it and how to look it over to find those things. But vacuum leaks are easy enough to find with a can of, I use carburetor cleaner, but you can also use water. I've got a video on that also that I'll post a link to in the description. As far as the, another problem is at 35 miles per hour, my truck starts wobbling. That's not really fast for quote unquote death wobble. Anytime you have sort of a wobble at low speeds, the first thing I look at is the tires, because it usually indicates tires aren't round. And a way to verify this is to rotate the tires front to back. And if the problem goes away or it shifts to the rear, then you know you got a bum tire. And that's where I'd be looking. So low speed wobbles many times is tire related. Jay Belknap, any recommendations on what to check if I feel a shifter movement in my 6-speed 2003 Nissan Sentra SER Spec V? Ooh, the Spec V. I feel it rock back and forth slightly, mostly in second or sixth gear when I give it gas and releasing on the gas, driving in town or driving in parking lots. Bushings, trans mounts, question mark. Curious if you know of any issues that stick out at you regarding early generation Ecotec engines, 2002 to 2006, thinking about buying a used Cavalier or Cobalt. Thanks again for the awesome videos. All right, as for the shifter movement, I think you're right on track. Engine mounts or transmission mounts. In fact, it's going to be next year before the video comes out, but I just did the timing chain on the 2003 Nissan Sentra SER that I'm working on, non-Spec V, by the way. And basically you pull that center brace down and you can access the mounts a lot easier. There's a brace that runs front to back from just underneath the core support on the radiator back behind the engine. And you can remove that, take it down, and take a look at those mounts. I suspect you have one that's pretty much beaten out. Anytime manual transmissions, they're pretty hard on engine mounts, just the way they are. As for the Ecotec engines, I can't really say I have a great deal of experience with them, but if you're going to a Nissan, to a General Motors, I think you're going to find that they're very different. And I'll just leave it at that. And also, you know, it doesn't matter what it is, especially if it's an older vehicle, check it out, you know, because you can have the engine or whatever with the best reputation, or the vehicle with the best reputation, and it could be completely used and abused, never maintained or anything like that, and you end up with a pile of poop. So, you know, I can talk about all day long how my experience with this or my experience with that is that this is what happens, but it's not often the case, because especially with older vehicles, it's anybody's guess how they've been treated and how they end up. Just saying. Steve Z, what do you think of brand new car batteries that are being sold at Walmart? These are value power batteries, and any size battery can cost about $50. They also include a 1-year replacement warranty. How much different would these be from a battery costing $100 to $150? I was once told by a pro mechanic that all car batteries are basically the same, and the price difference depends on the length of warranty on the battery. That's true to some degree, because the materials used to make that battery are extremely important, because basically it's a chemical storage device for electricity. And the better materials used, the better it's able to transfer that electricity, the more efficiently it's able to do so, and the longer it's able to do so. So better materials normally equal a better battery. Also, the way it's vented has an effect on your battery cables, whether or not they get really corroded. So I don't have any experience with those batteries, so I'm not going to say one way or the other if that's a good battery or not a good battery. But if you need a battery and you can only afford a $50 battery, it's better than not having a battery. We'll leave it at that. Outside of that explanation, I don't know what to tell you. But batteries are important. Okay, Thomas Campbell, hey Eric, I just bought a 2006 Subaru Legacy GT with a 2.5 dual overhead cam turbo. It has 125,000 miles on it. It's running great. What is your opinions of this car? And also, what are your thoughts on Lucas Oil Stabilizer? Once again, going back to, I can't say how a car was treated before you got it. I mean, this car is 9, almost 10 years old. So anything could have happened in that amount of time. I can say that the 2.5 liter Subaru engine is kind of famous for head gasket issues. You may or may not run into that. It may have been addressed in the past, but that's something that is well known throughout the community. In fact, do a search on your vehicle and see what the forums are saying about your car. As far as Lucas Oil Stabilizer, I'm not a mechanic in a can kind of guy. I like regular oil changes, regular maintenance, regular service. Those type of things usually prove out the best. As far as what happens when a vehicle gets old and maybe somebody doesn't change the oil for a long period of time, and then you purchase the vehicle and now you've got a bunch of gunk all built up inside the engine and a bunch of oil seals that are leaking. If dumping something in is going to be a magic cure-all for that, I'm skeptical. I'll leave it at that. Sean O'Brien. Oh yeah, I read yours. Basically, he's talking about a bunch of issues that he has with this car, and he doesn't have the tools to fix it, and he's asking to send it to me. As for me, I am looking to close out my year in the next few weeks, so I'm not taking in on any new vehicles at this time. I have everything that I'm going to be working on for the rest of the year already set up, and then I'm going to take some time off and get some rest. So unfortunately, I can't help you in that regard. As for tools, there's nothing like having the right tools for the right job. There just really isn't. And I know it sucks because they're expensive. And what really sucks is when you buy the cheap ones because you need them, and then the cheap ones break, and then you have to buy them again and sometimes again. Yeah, some of them have lifetime warranties or whatever, but sometimes after you've rounded enough bolts or you've broken enough sockets or wrenches or something like that, you say you've had enough. And then once you actually buy quality tools as opposed to using cheap tools, there's a world of difference. Now, I've done a video about this, and it's hotly contested whether or not professional tools are worth the money or not. And people seem to miss the fact that in that video, I said this very thing. If you're going to be working on stuff every day and it's going to be your job, go for the professional grade tools. You won't be sorry. They will make the money back. Whatever you're spending on them, you'll have them for a long time. They will make the money back. cheap tools don't necessarily work in those situations. However, if you're a weekend mechanic and you're only doing this on the side, well then, you don't need to spend big money on the tools. You spend what works for you, and you buy the tool that may work 1 or 2 times, and away you go. But if you're not a professional, there's no need to spend professional money on tools to have effective tools. Even those less expensive tools like Craftsman is perfectly effective brand of tool. However, as a professional, it may not necessarily be as good as some of the professional tools. So I'm sort of answering to a lot of the comments in that got posted to that video. Okay, Herschel Hendren. Hey Eric, he has a 1999 Jeep Grand Cherokee with 276,000 miles. You helped me before with my cruise control not working, and it was a bad brake light switch, and now it's working just fine. Thank you for that. Hey, another one that I was actually able to help with. My question is that I just replaced my lifters in the Jeep because they had an awful ticking sound. Already had rod bearings replaced, so I know that wasn't the issue. My problem is when I got everything back together and torqued to specs and cranked the engine for the first time, it ran like a dream, no knocks, pings, or anything at idle. After about 5 minutes or so, I revved the engine, and as a little ping knock come back, but about 80% less than before. After driving it for more than 30 minutes, it seems to go completely away. Any ideas would be awesome. Thank you for all you do. Have a great Thanksgiving. Have a great Thanksgiving to you too, and thank you for that. Okay, if you replace the lifters without replacing the cam, that is not the way to go. The camshaft is, the lobes are actually angled a little bit at the top, and the bottom of the lifter isn't flat. It's actually dished out a little bit. The reason they do this is every time the cam lobe comes up to the bottom of that lifter, it's supposed to rotate it a little bit so that the lifter keeps rotating in the bore. Cams are matched to lifters. If you replace just a cam or just a lifter, it's going to accelerate the wear on those parts because they're designed to work together from new. So if you take new lifters and put them on an old cam, you could accelerate the wear on lifters, everything else. Not the way to go. Also, I've said several times, as far as rebuilding engines yourself, you're much better off with either a salvage engine or way better off with a remanufactured engine already. Doing it yourself, not having the proper tools, not checking the clearances. You can't just throw bearings and things. You have to, at the very least, use plastic gauge to find out if the clearances are correct. What you may have heard probably was lifter noise, but there may have been another noise that you couldn't hear that you're now hearing because you've eliminated the lifter noise. But once again, you can't just go throwing parts inside an engine. It's all about measuring the parts and making sure the clearance is correct, because that's where the oil lives, and that dictates your oil pressure overall. So if the bearings in the bottom end weren't measured and those clearances weren't measured, there could be some that are still out of spec, and that could be the source of your noise. You won't know until you get in there and start measuring stuff. Engine building is not just putting parts inside of an engine. Engine building is blueprinting. Engine building is measuring and making sure that things are in the proper locations and have the proper amount of clearance. With that, that's when you get something that works well. There's a bunch of tiny little things that work together to make an engine, a transmission, a vehicle happen. And you have to respect that. You can't just go in willy-nilly. And I'm not saying you necessarily have, but you didn't mention anything about the camshaft with the lifters. And that to me is a red flag, because that's kind of a no-no. But I wish you luck with it. And I'm guessing probably the next thing you're going to do is maybe put some thicker oil in it. I would strongly advise against that. But if that's the direction you decide to take, so be it. Good luck no matter what you decide to do. And once again, have a happy holiday. Johnny Massengill, how do you feel about CVT transmissions? Thanks. I honestly don't have a lot of experience working on them, but they're weird because they don't shift. A CVT transmission, a CVT, I believe, stands for constant velocity transmission. So in other words, it doesn't have traditional gears. It doesn't go first, second, third. It has two drums on the inside of the transmission, and then there's like a belt or some device that goes between the two. And as you accelerate, one of those drums gets smaller and the other gets bigger. And they do this in proportion to each other. And this basically changes the torque. Well, the torque of the output of the engine remains the same, but it changes how that torque is used through the drivetrain in a very smooth way, because there's no shifting between gears. Just one thing gets bigger and one thing gets smaller. My opinion is it's a neat design. Early designs didn't do so well. I think Subaru was one of the first to adopt it. But since then, a lot of bugs have been worked out. Electronic controls have helped a bit. Better materials, better engineering. As far as would I own one, not sure. I'd really have to see what kind of shape it was in and if it was right for me. James Hall, how do you bleed clutch hydraulics on a Dodge Neon 2-liter engine? Clutch hydraulics can be oftentimes more difficult to bleed out than brakes can be. I did a video a while back where I changed the clutch hydraulics on a Honda Civic, and I did have some difficulty, and honestly, some parts are better than others as far as bleeding things out. In fact, I had more trouble with that than I probably should have, and they were aftermarket parts. But that being said, the thing that made it all work, made it all happen, was a vacuum bleeder. So anytime you're bleeding clutch hydraulics, I strongly recommend using a vacuum bleeder. You can pick them up like Harbor Freight. They're not that expensive. And basically what it is a vacuum pump, and there's a little receptacle in the vacuum line going to whatever it is that you're bleeding. In fact, a lot of vacuum pumps may even come with this attachment. If they do, then it makes it really easy. You just put a vacuum on the slave cylinder and, obviously open the bleeder valve and draw the fluid down through. And that's usually, in my experience, that's one of the best ways to do it. So vacuum bleeder is what I would recommend for that. Oh, hey. Clinton Erickson has a question about a 95 Saturn SL 1.9-liter single overhead cam engine, second engine with mystery miles on it. With a manual transmission with 342,700 miles on the car. My question is about the pre-ignition and detonation. Every once in a while when I'm driving, I hear a ping sound coming from the engine at cruising speeds, and when I'm fifth gear or accelerating. I tried replacing my plugs with better AC Delco Platinum plugs, changed my grade of fuel, replaced my EGR valve, ran Lucas fuel injector cleaner, and replaced my NOx sensor with no luck. I tried to remove as much of the carbon as possible out of the top when the EGR mounts, but there's still carbon buildup inside. I watched your video on how EGR passageways on a Honda Accord, but my passageways and how my EGR valve mounts is different, and I am not sure if your video could pertain to my vehicle as well. Yeah, you're probably right, it doesn't. Could the spark knock possibly be caused by pockets developing in the cylinder walls from the engine wear, or do you have any other ideas to try and resolve the issue? Any help would be greatly appreciated. Thanks. Stay dirty, and I wish you, Brian, and your family a happy Thanksgiving. Same to you. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, spark knock or pre-ignition detonation, whatever we want to call it. You are correct in that the EGR is there to help prevent that and lowers combustion temperatures to help avoid these things from happening, which are potentially engine damaging events. Now, as far as cleaning the EGR passages on that, I'm not really sure how to go about that in your particular application. If a lot of domestics of that type seem to just have a single tube rather than a bunch of little runners for each cylinder. So there may be just a single tube that runs up through there. But more importantly, on an engine that's got a lot of miles on it, something you have to watch out for is variances in timing. I think that engine uses a timing belt, and it could be that the timing belt has gotten old or worn, and as a result gets a little bit of slack in it. When that happens, cam timing changes. Also, and everything gets a little bit out of whack. And when that happens, if it's enough out of whack, it can cause some engine noise. I've seen it several times on Hondas, which is what I've mostly worked on during my career. So that might be something to look into. Engine mechanical is always a good place to go, but I think you're spot on with suspecting the EGR and the operation of the EGR. So see if you can dig up whatever information you can on how that EGR system is supposed to operate. And maybe there's some tests or some procedures that you can perform. One of the common ones that I know of, and this is a 95, it probably has a vacuum operated EGR. While the engine is running, hook up a vacuum pump, similar to what I just mentioned earlier. Hook up a vacuum pump to the EGR valve itself and give it some vacuum. If the engine stalls when you do this, this would indicate that the EGR does have the ability to flow, because it's going to choke the engine off at idle. Another test that I've done, like a quick version of this, is if you can reach your fingers up underneath the EGR valve and pull up on it and open the EGR valve while it's at idle, and you basically accomplish the same thing. This could also indicate that the EGR is functioning properly, so you don't need to worry about passages and anything else. So you could probably eliminate the EGR right off the bat if you can get the engine to stall by activating the EGR at idle. So if you're able to do that, then for sure, then your EGR is working. But if it doesn't stall or the idle doesn't change, then it may be a problem with those passages as you suspect. Otherwise, I'd be looking at engine mechanical to see if your issue lies in that neighborhood. All right, I'm going to jump around here since we're usually I'd only do these shows for half an hour, but today I'm just going to run a little bit long. Oh, David L points out, Eric, it's continuously variable transmission, not constant velocity. Okay, thank you, David, for that. So CVT, continuously variable transmission, not constant velocity. And here I am thinking of CV joints. Hey Eric, Scott Duty. Hey Eric, I just installed a Reman BYBA transmission in my 2003 Honda Odyssey. Ooh, what a surprise. I think similar to the one in your 2001 Odyssey, it's absolutely similar to the one in my 2000 Odyssey. The transmission shifts smoothly, but there is a noticeable whine that seems differential related. Whenever I press the gas, the whine is there. Get off the gas, the whine goes away. I asked the shop where I bought the Reman transmission, and they said the whine could eventually go away as the transmission is broken. And what do you think? You have saved me thousands of dollars. Yeah, it sounds like there's something in that rebuild that didn't quite work out. And it sounds to me like they don't want to go in and address it. is to be perfectly honest and perfectly blunt about the situation. Transmissions aren't supposed to whine. And one of the reasons I recommend remanufactured transmissions is the places that remanufacture transmissions have what's called a transmission dyno. So they're able to bolt the transmission up, supply power to it, run it through the gears and everything before it ever gets in the vehicle. And that way they can weed out any problems that might exist before they ship it. There could have been something that happened in the installation. It may have nothing to do with the remanufactured transmission itself. Maybe they didn't get a filter on there right, put it on backwards. I don't know. I'm really not sure in your situation. And hearing that sound, well, I don't like it because honestly, that transmission is weak to begin with. And what happens is the oil supplied tubes to third gear, they wear out inside the case and they leak. And that drop in pressure results in less pressure getting to that clutch pack. That clutch pack burns up, and 9 times out of 10, when you've got one of those bad transmissions, it has no third gear because that clutch is all burned up. And that's what was wrong with mine, by the way. And really, I can't remember what the fix was. Check out Harmon Gutierrez. He's really good with this stuff. In fact, you could hit him up with this question. He's amazing when it comes to automatic transmissions. In fact, I'll put a link to his channel in the description for you. Let's do one more. Let's see. Lots of people are posting questions, so when I'm trying to read, things keep moving down. All right, Kevin Sue. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you too, Kevin. Has a 2013 Hyundai Elantra with 54,000 miles on it. When I tried to turn into a parking spot and step on the brake, the right front end clunks, but it runs fine during normal driving. What could be the problem? Interesting. I'm thinking possibly brakes, or it could be a loose suspension component, but at 54,000 miles on a 2013, maybe. If it was a collision, then I'd really be buying into that theory. I've done a video about inspecting your suspension for noises. And what I would do is I would lift that wheel up off the ground safely, put jack stands underneath the car, what have you, and then grab the wheel and move it at 3 and 9 o'clock and then 12 and 6 o'clock. Just try to rock it back and forth and see if you feel any play or movement. If you do, that could indicate what the issue is. Also, look underneath for areas where there might be like an orange dust around suspension components. That could indicate loose parts, like around ball joints, around stabilizer links in particular. Stabilizer links might be coming into play here. That's one of the things that I'd be looking at. But start by checking for loose components in the front end. Do both front wheels, not just the one front wheel. It could be something that's happening on the other side. And basically, that's how you find these things. But safely lift and support the vehicle. I cannot stress that enough. Jack stands, good jack stands, before you get crawling under there or just start shaking on things and moving things around. Well, I'm trying to find something that's quick. Let's see. Adley Hondravet has a 2000 Blazer with a P1870 code, transmission component slipping caused by my transmission to overheat 280 degrees. Transmission still works, but shifts really hard. Do you think it's worth fixing the hard shifting, or should I get a new transmission? What I might try, and this just out of the blue, just to try, is change the fluid and filter. If you change the fluid and filter and you still have the problem or it gets worse, then you're probably looking at a transmission. But automatic transmissions depend on the fluid within them. So if that fluid is old or contaminated or low or full of air, another thing to do is pull the dipstick and check for air bubbles in the transmission. If you see those air bubbles there, it could mean, well, it likely means some sort of internal leak in there somewhere, and your transmission likely needs to be repaired or replaced. But yeah, a lot of times people come to me with this question and I say, change the fluid, change the filter, see what happens. And what's the worst can happen? And fluid and filter kits for that Blazer, I don't think that's going to set you back too much. Maybe $50 at most. And then you'll know for sure whether or not the transmission needs to be replaced. And with that, I'm going to close this one out. Now, I will say I'm only going to do one more show this year. I mentioned earlier I'm working towards getting a break. More information than that will be coming out on November 30th when the newsletter comes out. And that newsletter comes out on my website on the blog page. Also, if you're signed up to the website, it gets sent to your inbox and you get to check it out there. And I talk about it on social networks. But the next show will be on December 9th. And that will be the last show of 2015 that I will do live Google Plus-ish like that. If I did not get to your question this evening, I apologize for that. Once again, I will not be answering the questions that are posted to YouTube. I cannot see those questions, so I really can't say, so I really can't answer those questions. But as I mentioned earlier, EricTheCarGuy.com is there for you 365 days a year, 7 days a week, and 24 hours a day. So please go there to seek help with those automotive issues. And with that, also Google+, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, if you wish to connect with me socially. I close each of my videos, including these live shows, with be safe, have fun, stay dirty. Thank you for watching. Happy Thanksgiving. I will see you next time.